And it's very important to understand that what would be the right guide or what would be the right path to have a successful automation journey. Honestly, I have interacted with almost 200 plus customers over the last 4 or 5 years, and I have seen a lot of difficult journeys when at times, when you have an entire automation suite scaled up, and has to be a decision made where you have to change the tool just because of one mistake which was not considered a couple of years back. So it's very important to understand whenever you are into your automation journey. So how about getting the right guide, or how about getting the right blueprint? So here is my topic, the Hitchhiker's Blueprint to Test Automation. How many of you have seen the movie Interstellar? Okay, quite a lot of them. And how many of you have understood the movie in the first time when you saw it? Yeah, it's right. It's very complex to understand. A lot of intergalaxy travels and everything, and a lot of complex words. And I think same is with into test automation. But into a similar state, there is a very interesting book by Douglas Adams. It's called The Hitchhiker's Guide to Galaxy. If you have not read it, just have a look at it. It's a very interesting way of explaining that, how the basically traveling across galaxies and what are the different terminologies, explained in a much wittier way and much simple way. And it basically tells you that there is a blueprint or there is a guide to, hitchhike across different galaxies. And throughout that particular book, it says this word called as don't panic. And here, I want to tell you all, when you are into an automation journey, the first thing you also need to remember is don't panic. I know it's a huge task. There are a lot of things, frameworks, CI/CD tools, how you want to write those test cases, but always remember that you do not need to panic at all. And the book basically talks about the answer to the ultimate questions of life, everything, or basically the answer to the universe. Does anyone know what is that answer? Right. But here we are today not for the answer of the universe, but here we are to question that into the automation journey, what is that going to question about? So it's not about what the answer is, but it's about how and why. So the how will answer will be in the slides ahead, where we'll talk about the blueprint and why you need to basically, go through this blueprint, because it is going to help you navigate through automation very seamlessly so you don't make any mistakes. One interesting thing towards the end, I'll demonstrate one quick utility which I've specifically built for you all today, which will help you select the right framework for your test automation needs. And what could be the perils of, when you choose the wrong path, right, into test automation? Can anyone tell? I know I have listed few of them out over here, but can you tell me what you will end up with if you, choose a wrong test automation framework? Anyone? Okay. Okay. Anyone else? Wasted efforts, okay. That's right. That's again a very important thing. And one thing which I've often noticed, right? Everyone is nowadays moving to this modern frameworks. I think a lot of organization when I interact with, they are pretty much excited with modern framework like Cypress, Playwright, Puppeteer. But every framework has its own limitation. So you must always consider like how your application is going to scale down the line, and you should always be cautious about selecting the right framework. And many of you must be aware, right? When you choose framework like, for example, Cypress, it doesn't support mobile browsers. If you select Playwright, you cannot do an automation using on your mobile native apps. So there are a lot of limitations which you're going to come across. So you must always consider that during your planning. So how about building the best test automation strategy? So you're going to learn that. So let's first understand, how do you even choose the test automation framework? So map requirements. Whether you want to go with Selenium, APM, Selenium is more for web, APM is for both native apps, or you want a mix of both, or you want only web. So you can choose accordingly. Another interesting thing I want to share about parallelization, right? Lot of time while creating frameworks, we often miss on considering the parallelization. And there are different types of parallelization we can do. Can anyone help me understand, like what are the different types of parallelization you can do locally or on the cloud? Anyone? Okay, I can help you. So often you want to run tests on different devices, correct? So there are different types of parallelization, that is running the entire suite on one device OS combination in parallel, or running the entire suite on different browser OS combinations. So basically we refer it to as M into 1 or M into N. So this will help you basically achieve parallelization, and now you need to understand, like for your application, whether you want to have a single browser coverage with running all the tests in parallel, or you want to have an 100% coverage across all the browsers and run them in parallel. So identifying that is very important. Then optimum coverage. Again, I'm give an example of a lot of popular frameworks not supporting real mobile browsers, not supporting native apps. So you need to always consider like what does that framework covers. Test lifecycle management. I think a lot of here must be familiar, like, when you write an automation framework, you're just not limited to writing your test. There are a lot of pre and post things. So I see like a lot of organizations have automated to a level where the moment automation, kind of script executes, it fails, it automatically creates a Jira. And there are a lot of test data parameterization done, which is done before the test has been set up. So it's very important to understand all of these scenarios while setting up your, framework. Then skill set. If I'm an expert in Java, why would I choose a JavaScript-based framework? So it's very important to understand what is the popular language across your organization, across your team, what are you comfortable with, or even if you want to kind of upskill your team, what is the fastest way of, to upskill our team. I see a lot of organizations going for Python framework, and it's a good idea because that is a language which could be learned very fast. And community support. Again, very crucial point. If you see for a lot of frameworks which are very new out there, the moment you see the GitHub repo, you'll see a lot of open queries. And if you just go one by one, you'll start understanding that those are those particular questions which you are going to face down the line, maybe 1 year, 2 years, when you are going to scale your automation framework. So just understand what kind of community support you are getting while you're running your test. And the last one is cloud platform, right? You want to scale fast now. You want to run on different browser OS combinations. So always ensure that you're running on the right cloud provider. As the ma'am mentioned here that, the vendor kind of went away or it closed down. So it's very important to understand what kind of cloud provider you're using. And one key thing while considering the cloud provider is the integration part. We often refactor our code to make it run on a cloud provider, but the moment you want to change something, it is a lot of high effort. So it's very important to understand all of these points, while setting up your test framework. And I'm sure like some of the other point we know all of this, but I think we always kind of miss out while we are writing or kind of idealizing our entire test framework setup. So let's go ahead and understand the implementation plan. Like how do we get started now? So the first step here is like we have these 8 steps. If you follow them and if you have the right framework, with this you are done. So the 8 step will help you to get your optimum level of test automation suite running across different platforms. And if you follow this, you would be easily able to kind of automate any application out there, be it web, be it app, be it API, be it unit test cases, or even multi-platform. So let's talk the first step in the blueprint. So categorize your test case. Can anyone tell me what does it mean? Okay. Has anyone written your manual test cases? Yeah, I think everyone, right? Even I started my journey with writing manual test case, pretty boring task, but I see a lot of exciting AI tools today and sessions today showcasing writing test cases. So it's very important when you write a manual test case and you want to get into an automation journey, you can't go ahead and select the first test case and automate. You need to kind of categorize them. And how do we do that? Let's say your application has different modules like login module, orders module. So let me take an example of an e-commerce application. So if you have, for an example for an e-commerce application, you will have different modules like login, orders, checkout page, and those kind of scenarios. You will start categorizing your test case. What are the test cases under login? What are under orders, and so on. Now, break down the test case based on the complexity. Would you do that? Maybe depending on the number of steps. So if a test case has 50 steps, that could be a complex test. If a test case has 10 steps, that could be a simple test. So you can just try to, kind of categorize them on complexity. And last one is priority. So it's very important that you would first want to automate your positive scenarios and then go into the negative scenarios. So maybe a valid login, right? That could be your high priority test case. So this way, if you follow these 3 steps, you will start getting your test cases like this, where you put them into an Excel sheet, have the modules, test case, priority, and the complexity. Is the first step easy so far? Okay, great. Now, identify the implementation strategy. So how do we now implement this, whatever we have created into an Excel sheet? So this is a very important step because now we know we have the modules. Now we know we have the priority, but doesn't mean that you can now go ahead and just automate them, because you're not going to automate your entire suite in one go. We are today following a lot of agile strategies, right, where we divide our entire releases into sprints. So start working or categorizing your entire automation suite into different sprints. So what part of the test case or what complexity of the test case you'll start automating into sprint 1, and what goal you want to achieve. Whether you want to automate all the login scenarios, so let's say if a particular application has 100 test cases for login, and do you want to automate all of them, all the login at one go, right? Doesn't make sense, right? So you want to bucket or select some of the test cases from each of the category and have maximum coverage in the form of sprints. Going on to the next step, set up the test framework boiler templates. Again, a very important aspect where you will start using some base templates from different, maybe a GitHub repository where you can just pull probably, a lot of frameworks right now come with these boiler templates where you can just select the framework and you will have the boiler templates ready with you. Make sure that those plug in with the different browser OS combination which you need for automating. Those plug in with the different source code management tools, CI/CD management tools. And lastly, those also work with different cloud providers. So if you have all of this, you'll have your entire boilerplate ready. Now the focus would be that you have categorized your test case, you have set like what you want to automate, you have your framework ready. So you'll start writing your test case, right? But while writing your test case, you'll have to be a little mindful. You'll have to first focus on defining the technical, reusable technical action, basically creating reusable modules. How do we do that? One is like start with the linear script. What does a linear script is like? If you have a test case, it has 10 steps. Start recording or maybe start capturing your test steps into your automation script. Create a script like this. And make sure, like while doing a manual test case writing, we often write something called as expected result. And when we execute them, we often say actual result, right? But how do we do that in automation? We would use assertion, right? So make sure, when you kind of do this, you are also taking consideration of the data parameterization. So login would have different permutation combination. So one test case will work with all the permutation combination, right? Valid username, invalid password, or valid password and valid email. So all of those combination, it will work in very seamlessly. Going to the next one, defining the business artifacts. This is a very important aspect of automation. Why so? Because when you start automating your application, you want to have your locator stored into page-wise. And this is a very popular approach called as page object model. You might have heard this term many times, where you store all your locators for a single page into a page of that particular name. So for example, if you're on a landing page or if you're on a home page, all the locators of that page will come into a single file where, for example, homepage.java or homepage.js, and you will read them into your test script. Why do we do so? Is because if any change in the locator happens, you just have to make that change at one place and all your test case will still continue to work. Another important aspect is you're going to create a lot of utilities. And what are those utilities? I mentioned about the data parameterization. That data is going to come from some external system, probably in SQL, JSON, or even an Excel. So you need to create these utilities in a common file where you can read this anytime in any particular test script. And another important aspect which is always missed is the exception handling. Your test scripts are going to end up in a lot of failures, and not necessarily those are always element failures or element not found. There are different kind of exception which you will come across while you are writing your test automation suite. So make sure you handle them gracefully. So when the error occurs or the test case pass or fails, flaky test case, you will always know where the test case has gone wrong. I have seen one particular important step is just putting a retry function will increase your entire test suite pass count to a greater number. So very small thing, you just need to add one parameter, but a lot of time we don't do that. And I have seen organizations running the same suite again and again until they are getting a better number. So instead of rerunning the entire suite, just add a rerun on failure. It will just rerun a particular failed test case if it has failed due to a timeout or element not found or the slowness issue. Implement test case. Now, here is an exciting part. I think everyone is excited. Okay, when do we write test case? So you could see it's at the very end where we actually start writing a test script. And a lot of time what I've seen is everyone jumps to this step and skips all the first initial 4 or 5 steps. Why do we do that? Because we are always excited about writing test scripts and just want to get the automation done started. So you saw that if you just follow a very structured approach, if you follow the blueprint, you will be able to automate very easily. And I'll tell you, we have so many recorders today which record the test really well, which gives you really good locators if your application is built really well. And you can actually rely on these recorders completely. Maybe for some additional validation, you might have to modify the scripts. But straight out of the box, if you use the Selenium IDE, Cypress, there are even more, you can do that. Or you can actually rely on the traditional approach where you inspect the DOM, capture the element of that particular element, like the attribute of that element, and start writing your own locators. And if you're using something like a JUnit, you always ensure that you're covering all the possible combinations. So boundary value analysis and everything while writing a JUnit test. And another critical aspect here is the reporting part. Always ensure when you're writing your test automation scripts or when you're automating your framework, you consider what kind of reports you want. You cannot integrate them towards the end because it will end up modifying a lot of your effort in terms of setting up the entire framework. So ensure what kind of reporting your leadership is expecting. Based on that, choose the best tool out there. And now the interesting part comes where we execute our entire automation suite. You run it locally, you run it from CI, you can run it from any infra, and you make sure you capture all the logs from different systems, and you get a good metric out there for whatever execution you have done so far. So ensure you have a good reporting, ensure you run your test, and as you keep running, always ensure, I can assure you, the moment you write your first test, it's going to fail. But as you keep iterating over it, it will get better. The pass counts will keep increasing. And this way you will be able to kind of automate very seamlessly. And the last step is just iterate the steps 6 and 7, right? Add more new test cases and just keep baselining the results. Simple, right? Okay. So now comes a very interesting part. Again, okay, you told us the blueprint. Now, when we go back to our organization or leadership, they say, Okay, this looks good. You have a plan. How about we determine the efforts for what you're automating? Maybe a manual tester will do a much faster job compared to what you have spoken about the blueprint. So here is a very interesting way of showcasing like what kind of efforts we are going to put in, and I'll show a real example where how those efforts can be easily calculated and when you'll start seeing the ROI. So the first step is we'll understand whatever the implement plans steps which we had. We are just going to categorize them into effort. So for example, the first step would be categorize your test case and identify the implemented strategy. So that would take certain effort. Then setting up the framework and defining your reusable functions will take some effort. Same way, defining the artifacts will take some effort. And implementing the test case will again take some effort. So the total of this will give you the exact amount of automation effort required to automate your application. And I'll show you an actual example of this. So let's consider an example of a retail application, okay? And you can see a summary out over here, where if you have an application with 30 to 50 test cases, and you have 10 unique technical reusable actions, 8 application pages, overall effort will go up to 8 weeks, and you can see the values out, like how much effort is required for every particular step which we spoke in the implementation strategy. And you will start seeing the outcome in the 5th week, just for a retail application. So now any application out there which you are trying to automate, whether it could be an enterprise application, it could be a mid-enterprise, this number is going to just tweak somewhere around maybe 2 months, or you can even optimize it further. I've given you a standard calculator through which it will help you get that a rough number. How do you even calculate those particular efforts? And I'll talk about a very interesting example here. Same retail-based application. We have now different pages. I've divided those pages into different complexities. So whether it is like a small page, medium page, or large page, depending on how many elements that particular page has. And I've calculated like what are the total pages, how much time is expected per page, and I'm calculating the overall time. Same way, now I have different modules. I have different modules based on complexities. I'm calculating all the different modules for my application, and I'm adding some effort for every simple, medium, complex. Now this number can easily tweak based on your application. So if your application is more of a finance, enterprise, the number would change. And the total of this will give you the entire effort, that how much would be the effort required to automate your application. So you could see in this particular example, there are 20 days total taken for automating this entire application with, I think, around 6 pages, and you will require just max 2 sprints. So quick recap that we understood the strategy to use the 7 parameters of deciding the framework. We understood the blueprint about categorizing and reiterating those steps. And the last one is that we saw an example of how a real project can deliver the value. Now, so basically your navigation compass, what I have done here for you all is like, okay, we know the plan, but still we are confused with what framework to use. So I have built a very interesting utility. Probably I'll try to showcase a demo for this. Just a second. Yeah. Okay. So this is basically a GitHub repo. I can even kind of show you where is it hosted. It is completely open source. You can actually go ahead and try it out today. It is and kind of, if you want to contribute on this, you can do that. It supports a lot of different frameworks out there. The moment you just kind of call this particular repo and you just do node index, now it will ask you, what type of test you are trying to do, whether you want to do a mobile web, or you want to do a hybrid or a web browser. So let me select the desktop first. Then you want to do it in JavaScript or Java. I'll select Java here. Whether you want to go with the modern one or whether you want to go to BDD one. So let me select the first one. And it would ask me like, do you want to test your individual UI components? I'll just press enter. And whether it's a top priority or a standard debugging, I can select any of this. Now it gives me 3 options: Playwright, Cypress, and WebDriver IO. And it even gives out the description, what framework is what important for what. For example, here I'll just do a WebDriver IO framework, and it gives you now an actual working repo of this particular framework, which will run your test locally, which will run your test on Docker, or it will even run your test on a cloud provider. So you have this base framework ready for you. Just now go ahead, start modifying your test case, change the endpoint URLs, and you already have a framework set up with the best examples out there. Do you think this is very handy? Yeah? So do give it a try. I'll kind of also put up the link for that. Yeah, so if you want to take a note of this, you can have the boiler template generator link available for you all. Okay, and I think lastly, I just want to kind of iterate on one particular aspect. It's not about the best tool, but the best tool is to amplify human talent. Sharing about my personal journey, I started as a manual QA. It took a lot of effort for me to come into automation, and the thought process here is that even though we feel that a lot of time the manual QA testing can do a much better and faster job, but it's always you have to think from a long-term perspective for your application. So it's always make sure you invest in your resources to help them train and upskill them into automation. And I love to give this example, right? Like whenever there's a rocket launch, there are different stages, right? And I think even in the automation stage, automation implementation, we saw there were different steps or different stages where the application was getting automated. So it takes a lot of time from liftoff to actually reach the orbit. Same way, when you are kind of getting into automation, do not expect that you'll start seeing the results in the day one, but the day you will start result, it will be completely worth it, and you will surely, reap the fruits of automation. Yeah. And with that, I want to conclude my today's session. Thank you. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them. Yeah.
Yep. Good talk. I enjoyed it. I saw like the foundation of it very much looks like you're starting from greenfield scenario. Like you don't have any automation, or you have very minimal, or it's scattered. There's no kind of top-down we must thing. That's not really the scenario, at least my company's in at the moment, where we do have a real scattering of automation. Is this something that you would recommend adapting for that? Like, how do you recommend working in that environment with this kind of structured approach?
Sorry, your good name?
Charlie,
good question. And yeah, I think the idea here was, yes, to get started with automation. But yes, this blueprint can be applied anywhere. So even if you're into mid-automation journey, you might have to skip the first initial steps where you have already done certain framework, establishment, you have already chosen the framework. But just going back and asking the question, have you done the right selection? As I mentioned the example earlier, I have met an organization which has kind of, around had 2,000 plus test cases written in one framework. And just due to a wrong selection of framework, they had to migrate to a new framework. I think a lot of, you might have seen this, a lot of people who were using SpecFlow earlier, they had to migrate their test cases and update them. So it's very important, wherever you are into a journey of your automation, you can always ask these questions, have you taken the right path? And maybe what I would suggest you, if you're already in the process, you can utilize the utility which I have shown that. The utility has all the best practices implemented. So it has been created by folks at BrowStack, considering what kind of customers we interact with, and this is like something we recommend for our customers to also kind of get started with. So if you use that utility, that is a good baseline to understand are you as per industry standards or not, because we keep on updating those repositories time to time. Yeah.
Nope. Okay, now time for Sanket to ask the question.
Yeah. So, can you tell me the author of the book Hitchhiker's Guide to Galaxy? Okay, a lot of people know that.
You have to pick.
Okay, I think I saw her raising that. Yeah. So this is your voucher.